Yeah. Hi, Roshini. I'd just like to begin today's conversation just talking to the history of the gallery, and in particular how your father came to the world of art and how he decided the motivations to begin the gallery in the first place.
Okay, so thanks, Maud. It kind of happened by chance. My father had an interior contracting business. It's called Vadehra Builders. It actually still exists. That's what my brother looks after. And one of our big clients at that time in the 80s was Taj Hotels. And all the Taj Hotels, as we know now, in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Jaipur, everywhere, my father was a contractor for them. And he worked very closely on the on the interiors and all of that, and with Mrs. Kerker, who was the general manager's wife, who was sort of very involved in that part of building the hotels. And she started actually asking him to help her with the art acquisitions. And so when he started looking at art with her, he found it so exciting, and I think that's where it started from. And of course, when we used to travel, we used to always go to museums and all of that. And then, so he said, why not start doing this as a business on the side? But it was more like a hobby, because in 1987, which is when he started the gallery, there was hardly any money in it. So he was kind of just, he basically opened the gallery in his office, which is where it still is. And that building actually used to be a family home. So and so his personal office was actually my parents' bedroom, and then they moved to Greater Kailash, and then Defense Colony became his office. And then he said, "Okay, we'll just open a gallery." It was very casual, and my father's a very kind of impulsive person, and he's also a very how do I put it? Like he's very, I don't know anyone more positive than him. So he was like, let's do this, we'll see how it goes, and it'll be fine. So he opened the gallery and he started doing all of these exhibitions. And I believe that in the first year he barely sold anything. I think the revenue was like a few thousand rupees. And but he kept telling the artists that he was selling, so he would just keep buying the works. So those works, a lot of them are still in our stock room. So he would just keep he would just keep buying them. And and the artists were very shocked. They're like, who are you selling these works to? And he was like, no, I'm selling to people. And he would actually just be buying them himself. So that's how it started.
Because of course, in those days, as you said, the number of collectors you could probably count on the fingers of two hands. And that's actually my next question, is really, can you just talk a little bit about that moment in the mid to late 80s? I know the gallery has described having a space in those days as quite exotic. And I think to probably a certain section of the Indian middle class, the whole notion of art collecting at that time must have been a fairly new and challenging prospect. So can you just talk about Delhi in those times, and what was the art scene at that time?
So I think, to be honest, what happened was that my father got very lucky with some of the friendships that he made. And those were mainly with the progressives. So he very quickly became friendly with Hussain, Ram Kumar, Tyeb, Akbar, all of these, amazing masters. And they were a huge support to him at that time. And I think because of his, like I said, very sort of positive, and he was ambitious. They gave him a lot of works. He started doing very good, solid exhibitions pretty early on. And in terms of the collectors, to be honest, I think, it's not like he knew anybody at that time. So it was basically the collections that, he helped build. And what I understand from him is that, he was like, say Ram Kumar would say, okay, I think this is worth 20,000 rupees. And he would say, no, it's worth 30,000 rupees. And so he would kind of, take the price up. And he was able to convince people to, put in that little bit extra money, which, and so that's how the market kind of started going up. And then, of course, I think it was in the early 90s where he suddenly said, why is there no Indian art auction held internationally? So then he, did repeated visits to Christie's, And, he said, you need to hold an Indian art auction. And so, which finally they did with him guaranteeing a few numbers, basically, because they said that we need a minimum number to be able to justify an Indian art auction. And I think then the first auction was held in 1995.
That's right. And at that time, an incredibly gutsy move, because one wasn't really sure what the appetite would be. I mean, there was some diaspora acquisitions at high levels, but really, you were still able to buy masters.
So one of his favorite stories is actually calling a well-known collector, who we all know, in the US, and convincing her to put in a bid for $8,000 for a Tyeb Mehta. And she said, what is this? Like, I don't even understand this image. It was one of those typical, Tyeb, like it's not something which is beautiful and easy to put up in your home. And he said, just put in the bid. I really need the sale to happen. And if you don't like it, I'll buy it back from you in 6 months. And the work is still in our home, 25 years later.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So today, because I want to talk about the idea of legacy and legacy galleries, I'm going to now shift the focus onto you and to your generation and ask a little bit about your own background. Obviously, you were immersed in art from a very young age. But tell me, did you take more formal education in art or art history? How have you come to this world? That's one question. And the second is really when you were fairly sure that you wanted to take a more active role in the running of the gallery.
So interestingly, I actually never really thought that I would join the gallery. I studied finance in Boston. I thought I was going to be a banker. That's where all my internships were. And, I think I was stupid, to be honest. It was just me rebelling against my parents because my dad kept saying, oh, you have to join the gallery. And I said, there's no way I want to join the gallery. And so he forced me to take a few courses of art history, which I did because he was paying for my education. But I did not really think that I would, end up doing this. So when I came back in 2004, mid-2004, he said, just come to the gallery, spend some time with me, and let's see how it goes. And I said, okay, because I didn't really have anything better to do. My job with the bank hadn't really come through. And so I went with him to the gallery in 2004. It was July 12th. I still remember the date. And basically, since then, I haven't missed a day of work.
Wow. Gosh.
Yeah. So, it was exciting because basically 2004, as you probably know, was the most exciting year for Indian art. I mean, 2004 to 2007 was basically, it was, the whole scene was going bananas, right? It was wild. Like a painting in front of me went from 3 lakhs to 20 lakhs in 6 months. And I was like, what's going on? This is really exciting. So, I mean, not only the money, it was, the exhibitions that the gallery was holding. I remember one of the first exhibitions I worked on was of Rabindranath Tagore, Amrita Shergill and Jamini Roy. And then there was, and we had like these canvases of Amrita Shergill all over the gallery, right? I mean, now when I think back to it, I was like, why did we sell all of that? And
seller's remorse.
Yeah. But I mean, my father has endless amounts of, well, he doesn't actually. I end up having the remorse. He never has the remorse. But, and then there was I remember a solo exhibition of Anju Dodia, and, meeting Atul and Anju was absolutely amazing for me. And that was, one of the first contemporary shows that, contemporary solo shows that I worked on. And then in early 2005, we had this massive contemporary group show. It was a survey of contemporary artists in Lalit Kala Academy, which Vidya curated, who's the director of FICA. And so I worked very closely with her. I did my first artist studio visits with her. My first artist studio was Me Too Sen. So there was blood and there was hair and there was all of this crazy stuff in her studio. And I was like, oh my God, this is really exciting. And, I kind of understood that I had also, I was lucky enough to join the gallery at this very interesting point in, Indian art history. And literally history was being made every month. And I mean, I don't think any of us realized how crazy that time was and how, it wasn't really going to last. I mean, we all said it, but we didn't realize that, I mean, it was just a matter of 5 years, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, by then I was like totally immersed into the business.
So you've talked about things like Fika, your studio visit with Mitu. There were lots of different roads or paths that the gallery could have gone down in 2004-05. So what I'm really interested to know is, how did you steer certain decisions, certain choices in terms of creation of Fika, in terms of showing artists increasingly from a contemporary generation? What were those inputs that you gave quite quickly, and how did you have any pushback either from your father or from existing collectors or existing program artists in trying to drive forward those more contemporary paths with the gallery?
So, Maud, I think, you've been part of this world for so long, so right? I mean, I think everything in the art world is based on relationships, right? So when I joined the gallery, the one thing that I realized was that I was not going to be able to, and not that I wanted to, but I mean, I wasn't even sure what I was doing at that moment, but I wasn't going to be able to, sort of get into the relationships that my father already had. So if, for example, if he is, working with Hussein at that time, or he was working with Ram Kumar, they didn't want to talk to me, right? I mean, they were not interested. I was Mr. Vadehra's daughter, who they had seen literally growing up, right? So I was still the little girl in the little skirt who came to the office, and they were not interested in talking to me, or even the collectors, right? When they came to the gallery, they wanted to speak to my father. So very quickly, I realized that whatever I wanted to do, I had to do on my own, right? So, and the first few months, because I knew so little about the business or about this world, my father basically surrounded me with like hundreds of books and said, read, research. You're not allowed to talk to anybody till you know what you're saying. So, and then after that, I mean, frankly, Defense Colony, that space was a bit small. I mean, when I started looking at contemporary artists' works, I realized that I needed my own space. And, my father sort of gave me full independence, and he said, do whatever you want to do. So very quickly, I think it was in 2005 or 2006, I opened a second space, a contemporary space, which was in Okla. It was in where our contracting factory is, and I basically took over 2 floors, and it was a stunning space. It was massive. It was perfect for the contemporary art scene. It had this whole industrial look going. And so when I opened that, then I had to do some programming, and then I got into, I started talking to all of these young artists. And like I said, I started doing studio visits. At that time, Vidya was full time in the gallery, and she would take me for these studio visits. And slowly I started building my own relationships. And that's how the contemporary kind of, program started in the gallery. And then about Fika, it was very interesting. Radhika Chopra, who is an amazing collector. So Radhika and I had moved to India at the same time in 2004. And she and I met at one of our contemporary exhibitions, the Lalit Kala one that I was telling you about. And, we became friends very quickly. And Radhika said, because she had moved from the US, she'd grown up in the US, she said, one of the things that's lacking in the Indian art world is philanthropy and foundations, and supporting the arts beyond just collecting, and the collectors need to understand that it has to go beyond that. And so she and I started talking, and we came up with Fika. That's it. It was a lunch conversation, and we had no idea what was going to happen. And so she was the first director of Fika. And so we started all of these amazing grants, the Emerging Artist Award. Everything started sort of falling into place so quickly with Fika, because the one thing that I realized was that my father was already doing so much of this in the gallery. He was already, he had this artist award called In Search for Talent, but he would kind of do it sporadically, and he would support sort of different projects that the artist wanted to do, but obviously it was not streamlined. And, it was just him kind of wanting to support the arts. And so we set up Fika, and then, 12 years later, look where we are.
And you also had the publishing arm, I guess, also from the 1990s. So there was clearly an interest in non-commercial activity from quite early on in the gallery's history, which is quite unique, really, amongst galleries.
So, my father, like we basically, all of our holidays were around art. So going to Bilbao and going to different museums all over the world. And we used to go into these museum shops, and my father used to like be drooling at these books and products. Why is there none of this in our world? Our artists are as good as these artists, and we need to do more for them. And so books is something he's so super passionate about. And it's unfortunate because he used to literally do a catalog with every single exhibition. Wow. It was something that he was very proud to do, and the artists loved it. They finally saw their works being documented, and I think so much of that has changed in the last few years. None of us end up printing catalogs with every show. It's just considered such an indulgence for most exhibitions, but is something that he remains very passionate about.
Yeah. And of course artists feel so great about having something physical and tangible coming out of the exhibition. It's not just an ephemeral entity. So can you talk a little bit about some of the broader changes that you have seen to the business of art since even your father's time to now, and maybe just touch upon the present moment that we find ourselves in, and how the gallery has reacted to this present moment? Because I think that also ties in with some of the basic philosophy that Vadehra has around the non-commercial.
So I think, talking about the commercial first, one of the things that, when I joined the gallery, I remember my father saying that, there need to be, why don't we participate in art fairs? And, he had all of these ideas, like he wanted to be in the center of it all, and all of that hadn't really started for the Indian gallery. So I started like writing to the art fairs, and we started applying, and of course now the world that we are in today, so much of it is centered around art fairs, biennales, international museums, or even the Kiran Nadar Museum, right? I remember there was obviously no KNMA at that time, and I remember a conversation between Mrs. Nadar and my father happening at the gallery, where she was like, I think I need to open a museum. And my father was like jumping, and he said, you need to open a museum. And, and it happened, like all of that also happened so quickly. So I think the world we are in today is so completely different from, where we were even 10 years ago, and artists also have a completely different expectation from their galleries. They want to be placed in important collections, at that time, it was really more about the market moving, market going up, just trying to sell a work. Whereas today, when we talk to artists, it's about where is the work being placed? Where will it be exhibited? Will there be museum interest? So the conversation is so different today, right? And, even with FICA, the programming that we do, whether it's the public art projects, or it's the research grants that we give, everything is way more sophisticated than it was at that time.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely right. Okay, I'm going to ask you now a slightly tough question, but I have to ask it nonetheless because we're talking about legacy galleries. Roshini, can you see a generation after you? Are you interested or excited for Vadehra to outlive your own professional career? Do you want it to? How do you see the future of the gallery? Is that something you've thought about? Is that important to you?
I think, frankly, obviously it's something that I've thought about, but, the one thing that I know is that the world is just changing way too fast for me to make plans for what's going to happen 20 years from now. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm way too excited and passionate about what I do. But, I have two boys, and, whether they'll continue on with the gallery, I don't know. I don't even know where, where they'll be living, how the art world will exist. As you know, things are changing even within the art world so fast. Look what's happened during the pandemic, right? So, So yeah, it's hard for me to say, and there's no way that I would try and kind of force my vision onto anybody else's. I know that my father didn't do that with me, and I would do even lesser of what he did with my kids.
That's really nice. Well, thanks so much, Roshini.
Thank
You
you.
for speaking with us.